Hello there, welcome to Saberjewel Gaming, where we always take the high ground. And today we are taking a look at what the future holds for football games, with the EA Sports FIFA franchise long being the standard bearer of these games. That partnership, due to the financial demands FIFA have put on EA, looks to be over, and FIFA 23 is going to be the final game in that franchise. EA instead will be setting up EA Sports FC, and FIFA are in talks to create a FIFA2k franchise. So we're asking, will EA or FIFA make the better football games? For me personally, as a man in my 40s, I remember FIFA versus Pro Evolution as the big rivalry in football and games. But in recent years, it's only been FIFA. That's the only thing a lot of young players will remember. Reality is, football games go way back to the 8 and 16-bit consoles, and even to the arcades before them. But for most people now, these will seem like museum pieces, and FIFA, even discounting Pro Evo, FIFA alone will be what they assume football games are, and the EA FIFA games particularly. But for the first time ever, what we have is two brand new football games coming onto the market, both of which stem from that one game. So how's that going to play out, and which one of them will have the advantages? Well, the obvious and honest answer is that both will have advantages and disadvantages. First of all, let's look at FIFA themselves and that potential, and again for now it remains potential, FIFA2k games. The first and most obvious advantage they have is just that, FIFA. Those four letters. Most people don't say the EA FIFA games, they just say FIFA. And they will still have that name, they will still have that marketing advantage over EA, and that can't be understated. A lot of people might not even know if the change, hell, they might not even notice the change on the box. But then you have the 2K part of that as well. Let's be honest, most gamers, and especially those interested in other sports, have played at least one other game in the 2K genre. I myself have played NHL 2K games, and of course the WWE 2K games, so I'm well familiar with these particular games. So if I see FIFA 2K, that's going to tick a lot of boxes in my head automatically. They will also have all the licensing that comes with being a part of FIFA, which gives them that advantage too, something that the FIFA games originally had over games like Pro Evo. But there is one other advantage, and it could be a negative, which is why I've left it to the end, because it's potentially both at the same time. 2K, on behalf of FIFA, are going to be rebuilding this game from the ground up, from the engine upwards. Everything is going to need to be brand new. EA own everything about how the game is developed, so 2K are going to be starting from scratch. Now, that could be a massive positive. We've spoken at length at times about how stagnant and stuff the FIFA games have got, and this gives it the opportunity to be brand new and fresh and introduce game modes that are completely original, or even take ideas that they've used in the other 2K games and apply them to a football game. But the other aspect of that is it could just not play very well. In the early years of the FIFA games, they really didn't compete very well with Pro Evo, and the main reason for that was, whilst they had the licensing and potentially better graphics, the gameplay itself was really poor, and it took a long time, year after year of tweaks and improvements, to find the perfect gameplay. And the 2K franchise of FIFA games is going to have to nail that right out the bat, so it's going to be a tricky one for them. They'll have the marketing, they will have the licensing, and they will have the advantage in the areas of getting the game sold. Where they might really struggle is where the reviews come in. A lot of the other 2K games have done the same thing, where it's taken time to build up, but that might not be the case. You know, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They could take this and really drive it forward, and if they really show that they do original, refreshing things, that could be a massive game changer. I mean, if we look at this year's FIFA game, the biggest, at least advertised changes, we now have women's football teams as clubs. And that's a fantastic thing, but that's something that should have been done years ago. We introduced the women's teams in the internationals a long time back. Why is it taking this long to bring the clubs in? And very limited number of clubs as well. So that's what potentially something that FIFA and 2K could do right off the bat. Get way more women's teams in, have them actively participate, and really introduce some new original story and ideas to the game. But let's look at EAFC, well, EA Sports FC, a very random name in my opinion, but what can they bring? Well, we know they've already nailed down a lot of the licenses anyway, so they will still have the majority of the football brands for the individual clubs and the support of the individual clubs, kind of similar to Pro Evo did for quite a while, but on a much bigger scale. And whilst obviously FIFA is that huge name, let's not forget that EA Sports is pretty massive as well. A lot of people know this, and I think that the hardcore football gamers, they're more likely to side towards EA than FIFA, who often football fans aren't particularly fond of. As much as FIFA is the bigger name, it's not necessarily got a massively positive feel to it always. So it will still have its own unique brand, but maybe not as big as FIFA's. Interestingly enough, whilst we spoke about FIFA's 2K franchise having the opportunity to rebuild the game and create something brand new, the branding of EA Sports FC is actually one that seems new. The branding is completely original and new, so whilst the game itself will probably be built on the same existing engine, the feel of it probably feels like it's the fresher game, and it will be the one that a lot of the more hardcore fans will side with. But what can it do, and what might it do better or worse in the actual gameplay? Well, it depends on how I want to look at this. The cynical side of me says they've already got the engine set up, and they will effectively do what they've done so far, only without the FIFA logo. They will bring out roughly the same game with a few new cosmetic changes, they'll add a few new game modes, etc. But it won't massively change. But there is a flip side to that. This is the first time in years that EA's football game has had genuine, and I mean real, competition. It really hasn't. All you have to do is look at the quote-unquote legacy edition versions of the game, which have been released on the Nintendo Switch, which have basically been rehash after rehash of previous games, next to no game modes involved. Absolutely offensive releases, and they know this, and they keep releasing it because they know, what else are you going to do? What, you're not going to have a football game? There's no other options. Suddenly there is, and that other option literally has the name FIFA, their previous brand, brandished all over it. So what EA Sports FC, interestingly enough, now has to do is create far better gameplay. They can't sit back and rely on the hope that the FIFA 2k games won't be very good, that the gameplay will be poor, because if they're not, then a lot of their own fanbase will go towards that one. What they need is for their next game, their own individual game, to be revolutionary. Interestingly enough, the women's sport now has become a real blowout success, especially in countries like England, where they've just won the Euros. Suddenly there's a lot more eyes on that, so why not focus a lot more on that? They need to add new game modes, they need to give us new ideas, but also stop tinkering with things that actually work well. Why have all these complicated changes to how to take a free kick? Just make it simple, make it work. The main issue for both of them is that they've effectively cut their fan base, their sales, in half. It won't be exactly that, but they are splitting the same number of people between them, and the reality is, probably both of them won't last very long. It's a tough call, but FIFA games killed off Pro Evo. It took a while, but it happened eventually. You can't have two top dogs in the exact same market. Unless one of them goes a completely different route, the reality is people ain't going to buy both of them. Games aren't cheap. So, which one do we think overall has the advantage? I think in the short term, the EA Sports FC will probably have the better game. It's already effectively got the engine to make that, but I think in the long term, FIFA 2k will be the better franchise. FIFA is the big name, and 2k is a big name in sports as well. It also has the potential to rebuild, and let's be honest, football games have needed something fresh for a long time. EA, while they may have the backing of a lot of the gaming purists and a lot of the clubs, they've not been very good at listening to their fans. How many times have new ideas been put forward, or fans made it clear they like a gaming mechanic, but they change it the next season anyway? FIFA and 2k have the potential to make football from the ground up, and it may take some time, but I personally believe they're going to be the franchise that has the advantage and creates the better game. But if nothing else, at least the competition forces them to actually try. Thanks for watching. Please give us a like and a subscribe, it really helps. And comment below, which of these games do you think is going to win the footballing wars?